Just quickly, before we begin, I want to say thank you all for helping the channel reach 4,500 subscribers. As always, I'm a little lost for words. The support the channel has received throughout 2021 is astounding, and just to think at the beginning of the year, we'd only recently passed 2,000 subscribers. To now have more than double that is crazy. I just wanted you all to know, whether you're a new or continued supporter, I'm grateful for every single one of you, and I hope you enjoy today's video. Well, here we are, the final entry in this series of retrospectives on the God of War series so far. We've covered it all from the series' best to the worst, but now we're finally here. God of War 2018, a game that has been continuously praised as not only the best God of War game, but recently was dubbed the greatest game of all time. Let's just get this over with. When I initially played God of War 4 or 2018, I thought the game was alright. I didn't love the game like many others, but I didn't hate it either. I was just left feeling pretty meh about it all. I'm not sure if this was due to hype or too lofty expectations, but I just wasn't thrilled with what I experienced back in 2018. However, as time went on, my opinions toward the game shifted more and more towards despising this game, and it wasn't really due to anything the game did, but more so others' comments about the game. I think I've made this perfectly evident in this series of retrospectives, but just in case you knew, I love the God of War series, and what I noticed was happening in this game's reception was to build up how great God of War 2018 is. Many felt the need to disrespect the rest of the series. I hate to do it, but I've got to call out a fellow Aussie here to show as an example of what I mean.
We've seen games where they try to tell an interesting story and be weighty and meaningful, and we're going to try and do it too with the character who cannot possibly do this.
This is far but they've done something here with the character that they've turned water into wine.
You didn't play the other God of War.
Very limited experience.
Yeah, just a bit
very
limited.
Or something? I played the demo of 3.
Now, Endless Jess has done an in-depth video about what I'm trying to get across here, but these were the sort of comments made about God of War 2018, downplaying the rest of the series, even though apparently they don't know much about the series to begin with. As a fan of the series, this is what made me dislike God of War 2018 so much. I knew I was in the minority with my opinions, and to be honest, I was just happy God of War was getting so much love, even though I didn't personally see the hype. But seeing so many comments like the one I just showed to you just made me hate the game over time. With that little rant out of the way though, I was actually very excited to revisit God of War 2018 today. You never know if you just weren't in the right mood at the time, went into the game with too much hype, etc. And I wanted to see if playing the game today, I could finally join the majority and praise God of War 2018. I've finished replaying the series so far back to back, and now I'm ready for a change in pace. So now that I've finished revisiting God of War, the question is simply, is God of War better than I remembered? Let's find out. Just quickly before we begin, again, this is my final video on the God of War series so far, so if you've just found the channel, I recommend catching up on this series of retrospectives with the other 6 videos. Click the link in the top right hand corner or in the description below for the playlist, and what the hell, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Alright, let's get started. The story for God of War is set decades after the fall of Olympus, as Kratos has travelled to a new land of Midgard in ancient Norway, now living with his son Atreus. Kratos' second wife and Atreus' mother, Faye, has recently passed, leaving them with one final request: spread her ashes atop the highest peak in all of the 9 realms. Kratos and Atreus mourned their loved one's loss before going on a hunt as Kratos' test to see if Atreus is ready to fare the perils of the outside world. Atreus' performance leaves Kratos disappointed and reconsidering taking him on this journey. After returning home though, Kratos is attacked by a mysterious stranger who we quickly realize has godlike powers and cannot feel anything physical. Ultimately, Kratos defeats the stranger, seemingly killing him, but with a new threat of danger, Kratos now must take Atreus on this journey. Quickly after setting off on our quest through shooting a magical boar, we encounter a mysterious but seemingly friendly Witch of the Woods who, after we help save said boar, helps us in return by unlocking a passage to the Lake of Nine. On the lake we find the last remaining giant in the World Serpent, Jormungandr. Kratos and Atreus begin to make their way up the mountain in Midgard before running into an impenetrable black mist, which can only be passed through with the light of Alfheim. The Witch of the Woods gives Kratos the Bifrost in order to travel to Alfheim and secure the light. Now with the light, Kratos and Atreus make their way to the peak of the mountain where they find the stranger who attacked them very much alive and accompanied by two henchmen, the sons of Thor, Magni and Modi, interrogating a man imprisoned within a tree who we learn is Mimir. Once the three leave, Kratos and Atreus confront Mimir, who reveals that stranger is Baldur, one of the Norse gods and son of Odin. Mimir also informs Kratos and Atreus that the highest peak in all the realms isn't in Midgard, but Jotunheim instead. However, access to said realm has long been blocked off by Odin and Thor. Mimir knows of another entry into the land of the giants though, and instructs Kratos to cut off his head in the hopes of either being revived or ending his eternal suffering. When Mimir's head is revived by the witch, Mimir realizes she is the goddess Freya, and now revealed to be a god, Kratos immediately distrusts her. Knowing Kratos' own secret, Mimir and Freya warn him to tell Atreus about his true nature as a god, which Kratos has kept secret up to this point. Whilst out searching for the various components to open the gate to Jotunheim, Kratos, Atreus and Mimir are attacked by Modi and Magni. Kratos ends up slaying Magni, which Modi witnesses and in shock flees, but later returns as Kratos fends him off and leaves Atreus to suddenly collapse ill after the mental contradiction of a god believing they are mortal. Returning to Freya, we are instructed to head to Helheim to find a heart of a certain troll, but our trusty Leviathan axe is useless in this realm, forcing Kratos to retrieve his iconic Blades of Chaos. Once we retrieve the heart in Hell, we return back to Freya and cure Atreus, and now Kratos comes clean, telling Atreus that they are both gods. With this new knowledge, Atreus becomes honestly insufferable for a while, slaying the weakened Modi despite Kratos' request, and we reach the peak of Midgard and the gate of Jotunheim. This goes pear-shaped quickly as Baldur appears, and in the ensuing battle the portal is destroyed and Kratos, Atreus, Mimir and Baldur are hurled into Helheim. Now learning his lesson that he isn't all powerful, Atreus apologizes to Kratos, and while escaping Hell, through Baldur's visions we learn that Freya is his mother, and his invulnerability is due to her overwhelming need to protect him, casting a spell to protect him from all physical and magical threats, but also making him unable to feel anything, not even the simple joys in life, which has caused Baldur to resent his mother. We manage to escape Hell and make our way back to Midgard when Mimir realizes there is yet another way into Jotunheim, but he needs his other eye, which is inside the World Serpent due to eating Thor's statue. Once we go inside the belly of the friendly beast and retrieve Mimir's eye, the World Serpent is attacked by Baldur, and now comes the final showdown. Freya attempts to stop the fighting at all costs, but with a punch to Atreus, a stray mistletoe arrow pierces Baldur's skin and breaks Freya's spell. Kratos and Atreus go head to head with Baldur in an epic battle and finally defeat him. Kratos gives Baldur the opportunity to retreat, trying to connect and warn him of the price of revenge, but Baldur doesn't listen and begins to strangle Freya, forcing Kratos to finally kill him. Freya is distraught, promising her revenge and taunts Kratos for hiding his true nature. Kratos reveals to Atreus that he killed his father and fellow Greek gods, but continues on to say they should learn from their experiences and not repeat prior generations' mistakes, aka, don't kill me son. Freya leaves with Balder's corpse and Mimir hopes she will eventually see that Kratos had done the right thing. Finally, Kratos and Atreus reach Jotunheim, finding a temple depicting their adventure so far, as the giants had foreseen everything that would happen with some hints of what's to come. It's also here they learned that Faye was a giant who decided to stay in Midgard after the others left, making Atreus part god, part giant, and part mortal. It's here we also find out that Balder was after Faye the whole time, unaware of her passing. We learned that Faye wanted to name Atreus Loki instead, which is why that's what he is referred to in the temple. We reached the top of the highest peak in all the realms, fulfilling their promise as they spread the ashes overlooking a valley of giants' corpses. Kratos and Atreus return to Midgard, where Mimir warns them that the 3-year-long Fimbulwinter has begun, meaning Ragnarok is not far behind, though this was not supposed to occur for another 100 years. After a long journey, Atreus and Kratos return home and get a well-earned rest, where Atreus has a vision that Thor will arrive at the end of Fimbulwinter and confront them. And that is the story for God of War. Alright, there's a lot to go over here, but let's get this out of the way in the beginning. Not only is the story much better than I remember, but it is the best story in the series. The reason as to why this is the best story in the series though is because of what has been built and established through the prior 6 games. 7 if you include Betrayal, but I mean, why would you? As someone who has played through this series back to back and seen the character arc and development of our beloved Kratos, the change or growth here in God of War 4 makes a lot of sense. No, this isn't the first time we've seen a softer side to the ghost of Sparta. We've seen him show compassion, empathy, regret, and how he is as a father and husband. The difference here in God of War 4 is he doesn't have the overwhelming desire for vengeance, and now that he has accomplished that quest and desire, well, his character arc can become more focused on the other aspects we've seen him show throughout the series. It's not as if Santa Monica has completely shifted his character to something that is so foreign to what we know he can be. And not only that, but they use his past here in God of War 4 to great effect to show how far he has come without his tunnel vision of revenge, and now seeing with much more clarity and with the luxury of hindsight. I wanted to say all of this in the beginning of my thoughts because, as I said, Kratos' past and his character development through the prior games is too often ignored. Not by Santa Monica, but by journalists, outlets, and even some of my favorite content creators. The story is so great because it's a direction that makes sense for Kratos, and Santa Monica does a great job at highlighting that here in God of War 4. Kratos hiding his past from his son Atreus is a big aspect of this story. Obviously, the first half of the game and this story is more so about building this new world and expanding upon how Kratos and Atreus can make it to the highest peak in all the realms. But as the story goes on, Kratos is continuously hiding not only Atreus' true nature, but his past actions as well. The reason why Kratos is withholding this information makes sense, as he believes being a god to be a curse, seeing what the gods of Olympus had become as well as himself. But Kratos isn't just hiding his past from his son, he's also suppressing it from himself, which is why moments like the first encounter with Balder have the impact they do. He only activates the rage of Sparta within him when absolutely necessary, because he cannot control himself. The rage of his old self does evidently worry Kratos, afraid he may return to his old ways, and this fear is further shown once Atreus falls ill. Kratos not telling Atreus of his godlike nature has now put Atreus in a life-threatening situation, and his somber journey home only highlights how much he wants to move forward in his life, how he did not want his son to be affected by this curse, but he cannot outrun his past, and now he must, at least personally, face some of his demons. You truly do feel like you're traveling to Kratos' personal hell on this trip home as you encounter the ghost or spirit of Athena before ultimately uncovering the iconic blades of chaos hidden away, hoping to never see the light of day. Santa Monica really makes the blades reveal both incredibly awesome for fans of the series, but also shows perfectly that Kratos doesn't want to ever use these weapons. He has to, and using his blades again in hell only seems to further bring back his past through the visions of Zeus. It's these moments related to Kratos' past that brings fans of the series into this story a lot more, and I'm glad Santa Monica didn't just ignore all of this and move on to a new realm and mythology, and had the big story moments center around Kratos' life before Midgard. Once Kratos finally tells Atreus of his god status, predictably, the power goes to his head, and yes, for a moment, the boy becomes insufferable. Ignoring Kratos, doing his own thing, it all is very hard to watch stuff, but again, in a way that makes sense. Telling a kid he's a god, how else was this going to go? But thankfully, he learns his lesson from Balder real quick. Now, I'll return to Kratos soon, but whilst we're on Atreus, I love his arc here as well. Look, if your dad's Kratos, you're gonna want that man's approval, which is what Atreus wants. But Kratos is frequently doubting Atreus, questioning if he's ready to venture outside, are his skills up to scratch, can he handle his emotions? It's clear Kratos wants to teach Atreus how to become an effective warrior the Spartan way, which, well, doesn't involve a lot of love or gratification, and whilst this is making Atreus a great warrior and gradually garnering Kratos' approval, naturally you still just want your dad to love you and show that affection. That's not to say it isn't obvious Kratos loves and cares for his son. In fact, a lot of his reactions and teachings are due to a feeling of worry, but he's not the best at showing Atreus openly how he feels. It's because of all of this though that Atreus does begin to grow right before us, beginning as, well, a beginner and gradually feeling more comfortable not only in combat but in himself as well, to a point where he needs to be knocked down a few pegs and then knowing his limits and what he can and can't do just yet. Atreus is a great character, and seeing his connection with Kratos blossom over the course of the game was another true highlight, especially when both begin to open up more about the passing of Faye, who is shrouded in mystery for us the player, so it's great to, at least here, know how their dynamics worked. Whilst we're talking other characters though, the whole cast here is incredible. Mimir is another character we get to know quite a lot about, as he is literally connected at the hip to Kratos, and he and Atreus help build up this world really beautifully. Learning about the giants, the world serpent, the gods like Odin and Thor, the different realms, it's through Mimir and Atreus that makes the player want to stay around a little longer on the boat journeys just to let them finish, which is pretty incredible in its own right. Sindri and Brock are definitely this game's comic relief characters, as they jive and hurl insults at one another, but it was always great to stumble across these guys throughout the world, and they do have some serious moments too, and points of reflection like when a cocky Atreus berates Sindri for going over the same story all the time, which in the moment feels horrible and just further shows Atreus needs to come back to reality, but it ends up working out for the best as Sindri and Brock reunite. But this all leads me to Freya and Balder. First of all, Balder is a great antagonist for this game. In the beginning, you're just thinking, what the hell is this guy thinking coming at Kratos like this? But I'm glad he was such a presence in the game because Santa Monica fleshes his story out really well. Learning he can't be killed, he will not stop hunting Kratos and Atreus only to learn that he is the son of Freya, who has been helping you this whole time, making you question what her true intentions are. It's in the final battle with Baldur though, where I think his character truly peaks, which is sort of a shame that he dies so soon after, but obviously it makes sense. Seeing such a pure lust for vengeance like that of the old Kratos is great to see, and having Kratos try and console him, warning him that the aftermath and feeling after conquering that quest for revenge isn't worth it, which isn't just something we hear Kratos say, but has been shown through his actions throughout the story, showing mercy far more. Also, when Baldur is finally free of his curse, the dread from Freya yet the pure joy in his face from Baldur was a great touch, seeing just how miserable missing the finer details in life was for Baldur and why he would seek revenge against Freya. Then we have the emotions and pure, almost satanic and psychotic way Freya threatens revenge against Kratos for killing Baldur is a quality scene, and whilst I agree with Kratos that it needed to be done, I'm not going to pretend like Freya's reaction isn't justified as well. Then capping all of this off with Kratos finally admitting to Atreus why he left Greece, and what he has done was just the cherry on top, and then you realize this isn't even the ending. Finally reaching Jotunheim after this epic adventure is so sweet, learning about Faye's past finally and who she is, seeing the sad vision of the deceased giants, learning about Faye wanting to call Atreus Loki instead, and why Kratos chose to name him Atreus due to a Spartan comrade. It all wraps up so damn well, and all of this just made for a story that, when it was all said and done, it almost got me. Just one of those emotions where you're sad to see it end, but acknowledge how great of a journey it was to experience. This is all without talking about the mythology, which is once again loosely based off Norse myths, but as always, what having these myths involved in a story like this does, if nothing else, is make me curious as to where they pulled these ideas from. Seeing this rendition of the World Serpent, a unique spin on Baldur, Freya, Magni and Modi, the sons of Thor, and even just hearing about gods like Tyr, Odin, and getting a brief glimpse of Thor and setting up Atreus as Loki and all the renditions of the 9 realms, Santa Monica truly did a fantastic job at gathering so many great myths from such a rich subject matter and making it their own thing that makes it not only amazing to see in game, but makes you want to see how they potentially got here. Look, as I said in the beginning, and I'm sure I'll say it again, this is a whole lot better than I remember, to a point where, well, I don't even know what I was thinking. Maybe my nostalgia for the series was so high, or my hype and anticipation got to me. I'm not too sure, but it truly is the best story in the series. I cannot stress this enough though, the reason why I think the story succeeds so well is because of the foundation built throughout the rest of the series. Santa Monica does a great job at building up this new world, its characters and its conflicts, but the carrying over factor, that being Kratos, is why it works so well. Everything comes back to Kratos' past. This may be a Kratos not fueled by vengeance, and whilst he has matured, he has just grown into a version of himself we already knew he could be. I can't think of many aspects of this story I didn't enjoy outside of the fact that maybe at times it can feel like they added an extra hurdle onto the main quest to keep expanding upon this story. But even that isn't a big deal to me anymore because the story they do tell is incredible. God of War's story is special, and if nothing else, it shows the world the Kratos all of us fans knew he was and could be deep down. Once again, there is a lot to go over in regards to God of War 4's gameplay, and amongst fans of the series, this is the most divisive aspect of the game. So let me get my 2 cents out there before we begin to dissect the gameplay. The gameplay is the aspect of God of War 4 that initially turned me off of the game. I just wasn't a fan of the changed perspective, the lack of various combinations, dismissing the platforming challenges and repeat puzzle design. I just couldn't get on board with this massive change in direction at release, and for those of you watching this retrospective series without playing the games for yourself, let me give you an example of how big a change like this is. Could you ever see Devil May Cry or Bayonetta doing something like this? I honestly can't, nor would I ever want that, and that is exactly how I felt back in 2018. So what changed in the past 3 years? Because yet again, the gameplay for God of War 4 was much better than I remember. Well, this time around, I'd finished replaying 6 God of War titles back to back, and whilst I loved the God of War formula, I definitely was ready for something new. Did it have to be this drastically different? I don't think so, but I was more than willing to give the new style of gameplay a chance this time around, and I think because of that, I ended up thoroughly enjoying my time playing God of War 4. But it isn't without flaws. In fact, I do have a few continued problems with the new gameplay still to this day, so enough stalling and let's get stuck into it. First and foremost, the combat has always been the bread and butter for the God of War series, and God of War 4 is no different in that regard, except for the fact that it really is about 95% of the actual gameplay. So let's get the other 5% out of the way right now. The platforming is almost non-existent here. I mean, we don't even have the ability to freely jump anymore, so all the platforming boils down to is holding a direction to climb and press X to cross larger gaps. The puzzles, on the other hand, are still here, but more often than not are the same thing over and over again. There are some outliers, don't get me wrong, but you'll usually just be looking for the same urns or bells, a board to smack or a gear to freeze, that sort of thing. The problem with removing so much from both the puzzles and platforming is you really are banking on the combat to be, well, the be-all and end-all, and whilst I think the game does still pace out the combat encounters well, with the slower, more deliberate segments, and let the player really take in and listen to this story, in regards to actually playing the game, it does feel lesser than previous entries, which I'll touch on a little further later in the video, but now we've gotten that other 5% out of the way, let's talk the meat and potatoes. Okay, so the combat this time around takes on a much more third-person perspective with the camera right up close to Kratos. You have access to the Leviathan axe, your fists, a retractable shield, the Rage of Sparta, and then about halfway through you also gain access to the tried and true Blades of Chaos, as well as making use of Atreus' archery with light and electric arrows. Both your axe and blade can be leveled up, increasing their damage along with equipping runic attacks that you find or purchase throughout the world, and hilts that give both weapons a special ability, and Atreus can summon a friendly beast, again depending on what one you've found or purchased. All of these options and abilities are important, as well as the wealth of armor choices to choose from and create for Kratos and Atreus, because Kratos' overall level in God of War 4 is very important when tackling the enemies, as each one will have a certain level of difficulty now, and the higher that level is from Kratos, the quicker you'll meet your end. I'm going to touch on the leveling a little later in the video because it ties into a larger point I want to make, so back to the actual combat. Now, in terms of feel, God of War 4's combat still has a great feeling of flow about it, especially once you unlock the blades. You have a light and heavy attack for both weapons, a throwing ability, a couple of various combinations, parrying, evading, and blocking, along with whatever runic abilities you have equipped, and Atreus' attacks, and when it all comes together as the player, you do get that feeling of strength, fluidity, and flow that has made this series so great. Whilst I wouldn't call the combat a hack and slasher anymore, favouring a more Souls-like system, some of what made the old God of War games so great is still present here in God of War 4's combat. You don't have as many combinations, and without a jump button, you are limited to more stationary combat moves, but it's still great fun swinging around your blades or hurling your axe into pesky Draugr, or activating the Rage of Sparta and just wailing on poor souls. When it all comes together, it feels great. The big but in that statement though is, when enemies are in front of you, You see, the way the camera is positioned is just a little too close to Kratos this time around, meaning if the enemies aren't in front of you, your eyes are going to be heavily fixated on the arrows or spidey sensors around Kratos' hips, so when you dodge or parry an enemy's attacks when they're behind you, it doesn't feel as satisfying or fluent as it should. You do have a quick turn to try and minimize how exposed you are with this camera angle, but I don't see why they couldn't just pull this back even just a touch to lessen the emphasis on your incoming damage meter. This isn't a huge issue, and I got used to the new perspective rather quickly, I must say, which is why I found myself falling into that flow state more often than not. But it is a big change, and I don't think Santa Monica nailed the execution. I think an enemy that highlights what I'm trying to get across most is the Revenants. The Revenants are an enemy type that appear and disappear, only being able to be attacked once stunned by Atreus' bow, but they have an attack that is a long homing ground base attack that if they aren't in front of you makes it nearly impossible to avoid consistently. I don't mind facing off against the Revenants, they are always a good source of challenge in encounters, but they are already at times a pain to fight when waiting to stun them without factoring in finding them in the first place. Moving on from the camera angle though, as I said, the combat itself is a lot simpler than in previous entries, making the combat largely feel more repetitious than before, without the wealth of various combinations and freedom in movement this time around. You do still have a few different combinations you can throw together and unlock, don't get me wrong, but just not as much and with very little visual difference. So to try and combat this, Santa Monica implemented a few systems to try and change up encounters from one to another. One such way is through the different armor sets, hilts, and runic abilities for both the Blades of Chaos and the Leviathan Axe. In God of War 4, Kratos is a lot more customizable. You can choose whether you want an armor set or piece that increases Kratos' resistance to enemies, strength of his attacks, how quickly runic abilities recharge, etc. There are a huge amount of runes to find, purchase, or unlock with their own unique abilities like stunning enemies, coating the axe in frost to increase damage, iconic moves for the blades like the Cyclone, and you can even equip Atreus with a special summon that again can do anything from stunning enemies, damaging them, or distracting them. You have a lot of options to choose from, and you'll frequently be finding new materials for new armor, new runes, new abilities, so there is some form of rotating your arsenal and abilities, but when you find something you like, you can level it up to a certain extent to keep it relevant, though that mainly pertains to the runes and not armor. Armor definitely has a use by date. Now, this system works best when you're finding abilities that work best, testing everything out, and when this is happening, the combat does fend off that repetition enough to keep the same encounters fun. It's when you find abilities like the Ice Beam that is just too good to ever remove, for example, that this system hits its ceiling, and I'll give you an example. The Ice Beam is objectively the best ability for the Leviathan Axe. Its damage output is just insane, especially obviously against enemies with some form of weakness to frost. It destroys health bars, even bosses, so that's a runic slot taken right there, meaning you've only got one more to find what suits your playstyle best. This really isn't a huge deal that you can find objectively better abilities than others, but I think this system would have thrived a bit better if it wasn't one of the only ways to keep combat fresh and interesting. I actually really like this system and molding Kratos into the type of warrior I want to be and how to best suit my own style of play, but it just isn't quite there in my opinion, which tags onto the next big system Santa Monica implemented to try and keep the combat fresh, and that is through the leveling system. Put it simply, I'm not a big fan of this system. It's not terrible, and I understand what Santa Monica was trying to accomplish, but it just feels unnecessary. Every piece of armor you choose, what level your weapons are, the enchantments, etc., it all compiles into Kratos' overall level, which drastically impacts how Kratos will fare in any given encounter. Now, if you just focus on the main story missions first, this whole system isn't going to phase you. You'll level up enough to be the right level to take on the foes thrown at you without too much issue. My issue with this system is the enemy levels just feel so lazy. I mean, if you encounter an enemy a couple of levels higher than yourself, even if it's an enemy you've slain before numerous times, they'll one-hit kill you just because of that number above them. It's not like the high level enemies are new enemies with new movesets, they're the exact same as before, just for some reason can kill you if you screw up once. It just feels like a system there to encourage you to keep changing your equipment up, and in those optional encounters simply say, come back after the story. Which brings me to the elephant in the room and why I may sound a bit more negative than I intend, and that is God of War 4's more open world nature. God of War 4 has a lot of optional objectives, whether that be side missions, extra realms, collectibles, whatever it may be, there is a lot to do here, and because of the leveling system, I went through the main story content, exploring a little bit along the way, but mostly left all this side content till after I'd finished the main story. Now before I dive into my thoughts on the side content, I want to say one thing. When I finished up with the main story, in my mind this was one of the best God of War experiences I'd had. It took me around 18 hours to get through the main story and I was blown away. Where my opinion skewed towards the more negative side was after I spent about an hour doing the optional content because a lot of it does feel like filler. Obviously, this is all optional, and thank God it is, because I actually couldn't push myself to 100% God of War 4. The optional objectives killed any will I had to do so pretty damn quickly, because it's here where a lot of the issues I've gone over come to light the most. The lazy level system, the repetition in enemy encounters, the lack of combinations. Don't get me wrong, I love the stories attached to these side missions, and being in this world, just what I was doing got old very quickly. What broke my will to complete God of War 4 though was the two optional realms in Muspelheim and Niflheim, because they aren't the same realms we've experienced through the main story, and instead they are either a huge grind or a gauntlet of different challenges. Thankfully these again are optional, but what killed my interest in pursuing this platinum and 100% in general after loving the main game was just how boring I found these realms. So much so that I didn't even want to pursue the Valkyries because two of them are in these realms, and spending any more time there was not something I wanted to do at all. I will say Muspelheim is better than Niflheim, as the challenges can actually be some fun, and the infinite grind of Niflheim is just something that I found incredibly tedious immediately. Once again, I know these are all optional, and again, I'm not saying it's all bad, but the longer you spend with God of War 4, the more problems come to light, at least that's what I experienced. On the positive side, exploring and finding these unique stories, secret lore shrines, and experiencing moments that add further to this world is enjoyable, and why I still spent a good 5 or so hours with just the optional aspects of the game. I'm not saying the game being more open is necessarily a bad thing, and moments like freeing a dragon, finding and defeating the Valkyries, or finding out what happened to a father's backstabbing son are all really great moments outside of the main story. But the other God of War titles were max like 10 hours, and God of War 4 is probably 20 plus, which means repetition will rear its ugly head and make the changes to the gameplay that don't pan out all the more visible. Meaning fighting the same enemies for a good 20 hours is going to wear on you, and with the changes to combat and lack of experimentation or combinations, it is more noticeable. And without meaningful platforming and repetitive puzzles, the combat flaws come to full focus the longer you play. I know it feels like I'm bashing this game's gameplay, so let's talk bosses. First off, let me say, on their own, the bosses are a lot of fun to face off against. My main issue with the bosses though is how often they repeat. I mean, you'll be facing off against reskins of the same trolls, stone giants, even fighting Boulder multiple times and the Valkyrie, whilst different in moveset, at least in vibe feel like you're doing the same thing again. So instead of going over every boss in the game, which is filled with trolls and giants, I'm just going to go over the Boulder fight as a whole, the fight against Svartal Joffa, the dragon fight, Modi and Magni, and how the Valkyrie fights I encountered play and feel. Let's start with Boulder, who I must acknowledge, whilst yes, we encounter him a few times throughout the story, I don't actually mind that, as it adds to his character and story, and each fight feels great to play. The first encounter, you're still getting used to all the new mechanics, so whilst he packs a real punch, his attacks are simple enough to dodge and parry, and this is very much a battle to get you comfortable with the controls and make you feel powerful in the process, which, boy, does it succeed. Straight up, there are some epic Dragon Ball Z like moments in the first encounter with Boulder that, whilst aren't the most player driven, feel badass and all come from wailing on the invincible god, which keeps the player engaged. The second encounter with Boulder does favour the spectacle over the battle, which isn't something new for the series, but it does feel great to battle atop this armoured dragon, and again, wailing on Boulder just feels good. The third and last encounter is clearly the peak Boulder fight. I mean, finally, he can be killed, so the battle gets that feeling of gratification it has been building towards. Boulder here is a much different opponent though. He is a lot quicker, changes between frost and fire, requiring you to change up your weapons. Freya will try and stop you both frequently, and whilst I didn't find this fight too challenging, Boulder has a lot of health and this is a lengthy fight that always feels like it's adding something different. That final fight with Boulder is one of my favourites in the series. The mix between story and gameplay satisfaction was incredible, and Boulder is just a great opponent. Next is the battle against Svartal Joffa, which is actually a good challenge for the early game. He is very quick, his flight makes the rage ability harder to maximize its efficiency, the darkness he engulfs the arena in obviously makes his attacks difficult to avoid, and all this makes for a great battle when Kratos' arsenal is more limited than in other fights. One of the game's strongest boss battles and a lot of fun to conquer, which is what I look for in a good boss fight. Next is the fight against the dragon Hraesla, which is unfortunately a rather simple fight. Again, spectacle wins here, and facing off against this massive dragon feels cool and visually is amazing, but the fight boils down to throwing the red orbs at the dragon to stun it and then do enough damage to impale it. Great spectacle, not a great fight. The Magni and Modi fight is an interesting one. For being a battle against two gods, it isn't very challenging, which isn't make or break for me in this series, but something I personally enjoy, and what I find engages me in the fights. The fight is split up into 3 phases, and you'll need to knock both Magni and Modi's health down enough to initiate a strange circling minigame, waiting for one of the gods to run in and attack to block them. Both the gods' attacks are well telegraphed, and I just feel like you can wail on them without consequence a bit too often. I enjoyed this battle and the story implications, but not the best fight from a player perspective. The Valkyries are great fights though, which is why I'm disappointed some were locked behind the lackluster realms. Yes, visually they appear very similar, but each Valkyrie has their own moveset and tactics that make them a real challenge to come up against. Like Svartal Joffa, the flight of the Valkyries makes utilizing the rage ability effectively much more difficult, making the player rely on the blades, axe, runes, and Atreus much more, and because each Valkyrie is different in moveset or tactics, means you lose that feeling of repetition and always feel like you're about to be put to the test. I really wish I could have pushed through to see the Valkyrie quest through to the end, because I've heard great things about the final fight, but just from the 4 or 5 fights I experienced, these are great fun and a great challenge to boot. After all of this, I know how it sounds. I must have really disliked God of War 4, and that simply isn't true. Yes, I have my problems with the game, as I've made perfectly clear, but I'm telling you, I had so much fun playing the game in the moment, especially when the story was behind the gameplay. I love swinging and throwing around the axe. The blades feel right at home both in this world and feel true to form from the previous games. Finding new runes, making new armor, exploring this incredible world and slaying everything from gods to dragons to Draugr to Valkyries to trolls and ancients, it all is something I had a blast with. God of War 4 is a great game to play, but after that story came to an end, I realized what a lot of the changes in mechanics and new systems meant for the long run. It's not perfect. In fact, there is a lot you can point out and say, hey, what about this? But overall, I did have fun playing this game, and at the end of the day, that's what is most important. So after all of this, is God of War 2018 better than I remember? I think I gave it away a few times, but yes, absolutely. Don't get me wrong, I know to some people's surprise perhaps, the fanbase is divided on this game, and trust me, if you were to tell me you hate this game, I get it. But on the flip side now, if you were to tell me you love this game, and it's your favorite in the series, I get that too. For me though, I just loved this story. I loved how they moved Kratos' character forward in a way that makes sense as a fan of the series. Getting more limelight into Kratos' emotions outside of rage and how he interacts and learns about this foreign world. How well the other characters like Atreus, Freya, Mimir and Baldur are fleshed out. I mean, when I say I was captivated, it doesn't even scratch the surface. The gameplay is where I'm more torn, but again, the weapons feel great to use. The combat, while simple, is still enjoyable, truly highlighted when you come up against some of the great boss battles throughout, and exploring the world is all good fun. I do wish the camera was a bit pulled back, more combinations wouldn't have hurt, more involved platforming and different puzzles would be great, and more worthwhile extra realms would have been a big step into making me want to complete all of the game. But at the end of the day, the game is a good time to play even if it is heavily carried, in my opinion, by the narrative. God of War 4 really did surprise me though, and I'm glad I finally gave the game another shot without the pure nostalgic memories of the rest of the series, because I had a blast here. It's not perfect, but it is great enough to give me hope that Ragnarok has all the tools to build upon this game and only get better. But until that day comes, this is it for the God of War series, and what a game to end it on. Thank you all so much for watching the final retrospective on the God of War series. I had a great time not only revisiting God of War 4, but the entire series, and I hope you enjoyed revisiting the games with me. If you enjoyed the video and this series, make sure to leave it a like, because it helps let me know that you enjoyed yourself. Comment below your thoughts on God of War 2018 or the series in general, as well as any suggestions for games you want to see covered in the future. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, as we may be done with God of War, but the next series has already been decided and I'm excited to get stuck into it. Go give my socials a follow if you fancy, @MayorHairBear, and I'll catch you all in the next video.